Hey everyone, happy Friday. So, I have an update on the big, beautiful bill because, Tara, when we talked about this on Wednesday, remember I was saying conservatives weren't happy with the part of the bill that says it's going to cut out work requirements for Medicaid. Well, that was not correct. It's actually adding work requirements. So, I want to go over this again because I'm finding all this out. And I think where the confusion came in was around it cutting out the waivers that the Biden administration put in place. So, I guess from what I understand, states previously could require work in the past, but the Biden administration put waivers in place due to COVID. And those waivers are now being removed. And so this bill, the big, beautiful bill, is going to be the first time that work requirements are actually built into law at the federal level. And so what they're saying is they must complete 80 hours per month of work, volunteering, schooling, or community service to maintain eligibility. And so I think we talked about this before, but like Nancy Pelosi and all these Democrats are on a media tour and they're bad mouthing the bill and spreading lies, like saying how it's just going to get rid of Medicaid, when in reality, they're just requiring able bodied adults to work. So I'm going to play a clip of Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, responding to those comments and explaining why they're adding the work requirement to Medicaid.
Doing is restoring common sense. Medicaid is intended to be a temporary safety net for people who desperately need it. You're talking about the elderly, disabled, young, single, pregnant moms who are down on their luck, right? But it's not being used for those purposes because it's been expanded under the last two Democrat presidents and to cover everybody. So you got a bunch of able-bodied young men, for example, who are on Medicaid and not working. So what we're doing is restoring work requirements to Medicaid. Okay, this is common sense. It's about an 85% approval rating in public polling because it makes sense. If you are on the public wagon, you need to help pull it. And Megan, all we've done in the bill is add 20 hours a week, okay? A requirement to work for 20 hours a week or be in a job training program, looking for a job, or volunteer in your community.
Okay, so there you go. Exemptions would exist for pregnant women, disabled people, and caregivers. They're asking that people age 19 to 64 work 20 hours a week. So, anyhow, I want to apologize for the mix up, but I'm glad I was wrong because this actually makes me want to support the bill even more.
Yeah, I think part of the liberals' point on this is I think Arkansas actually did this back in like 2018, 2019, and it was really good in theory, but it was like a total clusterfuck in reality because they didn't set up the infrastructure properly. So I think they had like an online only portal and it had really weird hours. And a lot of people in Arkansas, especially that were in need of Medicare, were in communities that didn't have internet. So something like 18,000 people were inadvertently dropped from the system and it was like a shit show. So the federal government actually came in and like overrode Arkansas and said you can't do this. So they had the same thing. It was 20 hours a week, almost very similar parameters with the exemptions. And again, great in theory, but just very poor execution. But I think all of this might actually end up being a moot point because yesterday, the Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough rejected the Medicaid reforms in the tax bill because she said it violates the Byrd rule on budget measures. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry because neither did I. And I had to ask our GPT what the Byrd rule is, what the Senate parliamentarian role involves, and why all of this matters so much. So I want to start with the Byrd rule, which is basically a rule that blocks any kind of extraneous non-budgetary provisions within reconciliation bills. So basically anything that doesn't have a direct and measurable impact on federal spending or revenue. And this is important because reconciliation bills only require a simple majority of 51 votes to pass. So McDonough struck four provisions in the Big Beautiful Bill related to Medicaid. One was cutting Medicaid provider taxes, which she said didn't qualify because this was more policy than budgetary. Another was limiting Medicaid coverage for non-citizens, which she claimed was more ideological than fiscal. Another one was ban on coverage for gender affirming care, which she said was outside the scope of fiscal legislation. And then reducing FMAP, which is the federal medical assistance percentage, which would raise the cost for states to provide Medicaid coverage to non-citizens, which I think should be the case. But she said that was also a policy-driven change and not a fiscal one. And because of her saying that these provisions violate the Byrd rule, that means they will require a 60 vote supermajority instead of a simple 51 vote majority. So these Medicaid cuts can't pass under reconciliation. And to get them included, Republicans will need to either find 9 to 10 Democratic votes, which is very unlikely, or they're going to have to ignore or override McDonough's ruling, which also seems unlikely. So Thune, Senator Thune, he called this just a speed bump, but it looks like now they're going to have to rework the bill. And because of all this coming up, Senate Democrats are now saying that, oh, other provisions like banning spread pricing by pharmacy benefit managers, zoning restrictions of Medicaid and CHIP benefits for non-citizens, and restrictions on premium tax credits for immigrants should also be subject to Byrd rule challenges. So who is the Senate parliamentarian? Because I had no idea what this position even was. But apparently, it's a nonpartisan advisor whose job is to interpret Senate rules and precedents and enforce the Byrd rule on budget measures. And technically, the presiding officer of the Senate, which is the vice president, or a rotating Republican senator, because the vice president usually isn't there for Senate meetings, gets to make the final ruling. So technically, J.D. Vance could overrule her, but apparently the Senate almost always follows the parliamentarian's advice, and overruling the parliamentarian is a very rare and politically costly risk. So the last time a parliamentarian was overruled was in 2001, and that was Robert Dove, who was fired by GOP Senate leadership after disputes over budget rules. But the parliamentarian also serves at the pleasure of the Senate Majority Leader, which is John Thune. So technically, he could also replace her. But McDonough has been the Senate parliamentarian since February of 2012. She's the first ever woman to hold the position, and she's only the sixth parliamentarian since this position was created back in 1935. So she's been there through both Democrat and Republican administrations. And Democrats actually debated overruling her in 2013 and also in 2021 because they wanted to include immigration reform in the reconciliation, but Kamala didn't pull the trigger. And so if J.D. Vance does, it would be totally constitutional and within the law, but it would also be incredibly controversial. And obviously, it would create even more of a media firestorm and cries from the left that the Trump administration is trying to destroy Senate norms. So it's highly unlikely that she will be overruled or replaced. But Trump really wants this budget, right? And the Trump administration has been such a wild card. They don't seem to give a shit about controversy. So maybe it's possible that she will get overruled.
I feel like we should bet on this. Like, I think he's going to do it because I think it was Mike Johnson that was also talking about how Trump really wants this signed on the 4th of July.
Mhm.
And, as long as everything moves smoothly, like that could happen. But now, obviously, this is a bump in the road. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think this could be a moment where, I mean, either way, the media is going to attack them. So
Right,
might as well get what you want, right? It's
exactly.
funny because with this whole topic, I keep seeing this clip resurfacing of Ronald Reagan where he's talking to an audience and he's saying, yeah, I was at my neighbors or my friends, whatever, and their little girl said she wants to be president someday. And so he said, oh, that's great. What will you do as president? What's the first thing you'll do? And she's like, well, I'll give free food to everyone. He's like, well, you don't have to wait to be president to do that. You can come and cut my grass and clean up my yard, and I'll give you money. And then I'll take you over to the grocery store and you can buy food with that money and go give it to people in need. And he said she thought about it for a minute and then she said, well, why don't the people in need just come and cut your grass and get the money directly from you? And he said, welcome to the Republican Party. And I'm just like, that is so perfect. But really, I mean, this is something I remember talking about this when I was in high school. Like, why aren't there more requirements for
Mhm.
people who are completely able-bodied if they want to receive this funding? So just crazy, but I don't know. I think JD Vance might do it. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll keep a eye on it. But there has been another big thing in the news, which is another leak coming out of the administration. And so early U.S. intelligence, the preliminary Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, reportedly found that the strikes on the three key Iranian nuclear sites didn't completely destroy the underground infrastructure. So that was like the preliminary report, right? This ended up being leaked to CNN and the New York Times. And so, of course, they run with it, trying to make Trump look bad and making it look like the strikes were not a success. CNN, they had the headline, quote, early U.S. intel assessment suggests strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites, sources say. And the article like flat out states that this was top secret information that was leaked, which is completely illegal for whoever leaked it. And so I want to play a clip of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on what happened.
Of that assessment was not leaked to the media. Only tidbits of that assessment were leaked to CNN. And we have seen this playbook run before, where you have people in the intelligence community or perhaps on Capitol Hill. We don't know, but I believe the FBI is investigating to find out who that leaker was because it's illegal and they should be held accountable for that. Leaked bits and pieces of an intel assessment to push a false narrative. And it's to the same reporter, I will add, Natasha Bertrand of CNN, who has done this in the past. In 2020, it was Natasha Bertrand who had 51 intelligence analysts falsely lie to her, but she still put it on paper for some reason, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know that's not true, right? We can all agree on that now. That was a lie from the intelligence community. Also in 2020, this same reporter, Natasha Bertrand, wrote that a top intel agency ruled out the man-made lab leak theory of the coronavirus origins. Again, the president was right about that. This reporter wrote a lie from the intelligence community to seek a narrative she wanted to prove. And guess what? We now know that's the truth. Also, in 2024, Bertrand pushed the suckers and losers hoax. She also pushed the fine people hoax, which was taking the president's words purposely out of context. And then last October, and I believe this is notable, Natasha Bertrand published an article in Politico from the intelligence agency. She said that John Ratcliffe was speaking without any evidence when he said Iran was attempting to undermine President Trump's presidential campaign. And then we, of course, found out that was absolutely true. In fact, the Biden administration declassed an intel report which said they had high confidence that Iran had done exactly what Ratcliffe alleged. They did run an influence campaign to hurt President Trump's candidacy. In fact, we know the Iranians tried to take President Trump's life. And so this is a reporter who has been unfortunately used by people who dislike Donald Trump in this government to push fake and false narratives. She should be ashamed of herself. And that's not what reporters it. Journalism is trying to find the facts and the truth. And this week, we saw this same reporter being used to push a fake narrative to try to undermine the president of the United States. And more importantly, the brave fighter pilots who conducted one of the most successful operations in United States history. And I think the American people fully know that this operation was a complete and total success.
My question is, why does she have a job if she's peddled that many lies?
Exactly. And who is feeding her this information?
And who's still listening to her? Like,
Right.
fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, I mean, that is multiple lies in a short period of time. I don't think we need to listen to anything she says. But this is what they do, right? I mean, it's no surprise. They'll do anything to make Trump and his administration look bad. So after that press conference, Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, the Democrats are the ones who leaked the information on the perfect flight to the nuclear sites in Iran. They should be prosecuted. And off, like outside of the press room, Caroline Levitt was like asked again about this. And as she was walking away, they're like, "What do you think should happen?" And she's like, "They should be in jail." I'm like, that would be great.
Agreed.
They should do, you know, they need to make an example of whoever leaked this information because these leaks are getting ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've been seeing like so many different narratives on this whole bombing. And when I first saw this article, it was after we had done our podcast on Wednesday. And I was like, shit, maybe they didn't decimate Iran's nuclear facilities. But, then Trump is being adamant that the initial intelligence was inconclusive and similar with what Carolyn Levitt said. He was like, shame on the media for discrediting the military members and the pilots who put their lives at risk to carry out this mission. And reportedly, Iran Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghay. I'm gonna fuck up a lot of names today, just so you know, because
I
there's some
always do.
I'm
So
referencing that I cannot pronounce. But this guy said, quote, our nuclear installations have been badly damaged, that's for sure, end quote. And then Netanyahu gave a televised statement on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, and he said that ruin was brought to Iran's nuclear I'm not sorry, program. And then Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, he declared yesterday that the centrifuges at the Fordow facility are no longer operational. And he told Radio France International that there was no escaping significant physical damage and that the IAEA came to a fairly accurate technical conclusion. But then yesterday, several members of Congress attended a briefing held by the Trump administration. And afterwards, Senator Chris Murphy told the press that he's unconvinced of Trump's claims that Iran's nuclear sites were obliterated. So he said to the media, quote, to me, it still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months. There's no doubt there was damage done to the program, but the allegations that we have obliterated their program just don't seem to stand up to reason. I just don't think the president was telling the truth when he said the program was obliterated. There was certainly damage done to the program, but there's still significant remaining capacity. I walk away from that briefing still under the belief that we have not obliterated the program, and the president was deliberately misleading the public, end quote. And then yesterday, also, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, came out of hiding and delivered his first public address since the U.S. strikes on Iran. And he also dismissed the claims that the U.S. obliterated their nuclear capabilities and said the attacks were exaggerated and didn't achieve anything significant. He also emphasized Iran's capacity to hit U.S. military sites in the region and vowed that these kind of strikes would be repeatable if the U.S. plays aggressor again. But then he also said that Iran emerged victorious in this 12-day war, which does not seem possible to me. So I think this is just political theater and he's trying to save face. But who knows what the fuck is true or false at this point? The bigger issue is the fact that there's a leak. Like, this is the third or fourth time that this has happened just what in the last few months with this administration?
yeah, it's getting ridiculous. And that's why I think they need to make an example of whoever it was. And that's why when Trump posted that this was Democrats, like, I don't know if he was just venting or if I mean, they're doing their investigation and maybe they did find specific people and they know that they're Democrat. I don't know. But you can go online and see the satellite footage of before and after these nuclear sites. I mean, I'm not an expert, but they sure as hell look obliterated to me. And I guess technically, like they could have moved, the uranium, but like, would they have done, you know how hard it is to move something like that, especially when you're under fire from Israel and you have the whole world watching? Like, I think it's highly unlikely. And I don't know. The whole thing is just a big question mark, I guess. But yeah, like take care of the leaker and make an example of them so this shit stops and get rid of this reporter. Like, she needs to lose her job at this point. I mean, CNN is already going downhill. Um, but my God, like how many times can you screw up, you know?
Exactly. All right, I want to give an update on the NATO summit and how day two went with Trump's meeting with Zelensky. But before that, I want to comment on how much I love this administration and the fact that, like, Trump just owns and embraces being human. And so does the rest of his administration. So I don't know if you saw this, I'm sure you did. There was a press conference during the summit And they were talking about US leadership and military de-escalation and how Trump handled the Iran-Israel conflict. And Trump was talking about the ceasefire, and he was basically saying, like, the two countries are acting like children fighting in a schoolyard. And he said, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2, 3 minutes, then it's easier to stop them. And then NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, is it Rutte? Rutt? I don't know how to pronounce his
I
name either.
think it's root.
Root, we're going to go with that. He interjected and said, quote, daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get them to stop, end quote, which obviously was in reference to the media horror at Trump saying fuck on a live broadcast a couple days ago. So a reporter asked him about calling Trump daddy, and Trump said, um, I think he likes me. Daddy, you're my daddy. He did it very affectionately. And then Root had to clarify to the media that he wasn't literally calling Trump daddy, and he was using it as a metaphor to compare Europe's relationship with the US to a child asking its father for reassurance. So instead of trying to cover it up or ignore this, I just love that the White House fully leaned into the moment and released a viral video called Daddy's Home. President Donald J. Trump attends the NATO Summit 2025. And it's all these images and short video clips of Trump at the summit. And fuck, he just looks powerful. And in the background, it's the Usher song. It's either called like Hey Daddy or Daddy's Home. And they made the whole thing fun and badass at the same time. And I just thought that's so awesome because the Biden admin would have tried to cover it up and do like pretend it never happened.
They do so many good videos. Team Trump is the account on TikTok, and like, yeah, they just own it. And
Mhm.
it makes him look so much more relatable than any other politician because he
Yeah.
just has a sense of humor and can roll with it. But of course, the media has to like take this out of context and try to spin it as if Root was feeling like he has to talk to Trump that way. And it's just so ridiculous. So here's Root's response to the media.
That you have used when talking to Donald Trump has been notable because of its flattery. Today, you called him daddy, and you sent a text message to him that was gushing with praise. Is this the way that you feel you have to act when doing business with the US president, through flattery and praise? When he is doing stuff which is forcing us to, for example, when it comes to making more investments. Would you ever think that this would be the result of this summit if he would not have been re-elected president? So doesn't he deserve some praise? And when it comes to Iran, the fact that he took this decisive action, very targeted, to make sure that Iran would not be able to get its hands on a nuclear capability, I think he deserves all the praise.
So he thinks he deserves all the praise. And he makes a good point. Would any of this have happened where all of these NATO nations agree to 5%? Would that have happened if Trump wasn't in office? Hell no, it wouldn't have
Right.
happened. So, yeah, he deserves the praise. But of course, they try to spin it like, oh, you know, this is how you have to do business with him. You have to like stroke his ego kind of thing. And that really wasn't the case. I mean, if you watch the video, like, I think they completely took the whole thing out of context.
Yeah, it was actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you just mentioned the 5% of GDP. So on Wednesday, NATO released a joint statement where they said, quote, united in the face of profound security threats and challenges, in particular, the long-term threat posed by Russia to Euro-Atlantic security and the persistent threat of terrorism, allies commit to invest 5% of GDP annually on core defense requirements, as well as defense and security related spending by 2035 to ensure our individual and collective obligations. So then yesterday, Trump does one of his Truth Social posts, and he says, the NATO summit yesterday was great, the most unified and productive in history. A wonderful day with incredible and caring leaders. The agreed to 5% gives NATO real power. And so I guess he's back on board with NATO now that they're going to be contributing their fair share. I didn't see a specific post about his meeting with Zelensky, but he told reporters that Zelensky was a nice guy, said their meeting was long and substantive. And he also said that even though he and Zelensky have gone through rough times, he's trying to end the war and that the US may consider providing additional Patriot missile systems to Kiev, but that they're very hard to get. So Zelensky then made a post on X and he said, quote, "We covered all the truly important issues. I thank Mr. President. I thank the United States. We discussed how to achieve a ceasefire and a real peace. We spoke about how to protect our people. We appreciate the attention and the readiness to help bring peace closer. Details will follow." So it sounds like maybe, the rift from the White House debacle is slightly mended. Maybe it's just political games. I don't know. But the president of Turkey, I'm going to butcher this, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, met with Trump yesterday and apparently proposed hosting a trilateral peace summit with Zelensky, Putin, and Trump. And Trump's response was that if Putin comes to the meeting in Turkey for a solution, then he will also go.
I think after seeing what happened with Israel and Iran, like I do think that kind of paves the way for
Mhm.
Putin and Zelensky to come to the table and negotiate. And I came across this clip. I wish I would have saved it. At the NATO summit, there was a Ukrainian reporter, and she was asking Trump, trying to see, are we going to get more funding? Can you put in like a missile defense system? I don't know if she was talking about like an Iron Dome or something like that. And the way he spoke to her, it was so like he's just so good at this. He just kind of started talking to her like a human being and saying like, "Wow, you're in Ukraine?" And she's like, "Well, actually I'm in Poland now." And he's like, "Well, what about your family? Are they safe?" And I'm so sorry, that everything's being destroyed. And he really like did a great job of kind of getting off the topic of funding for a second and just showing that these are real people that are being affected and dying and having to flee, where they live, and kind of like tied it up at the end of like this is why we need to come to an agreement and have a peace deal and not continue fighting. So like I just thought it was such a good way to kind of turn around the question being asked and like make his point, but he did it in a very compassionate way. I mean, this woman was like totally caught off guard that he was asking her about her personal well-being.
And he's sincere about it.
Totally sincere. Yes.
And that's the thing. Like if the Biden admin tried this, it would be an epic fail because he was never fucking sincere about anything. And it was very clear he didn't care about the people of Ukraine because never even talked about the people of Ukraine or all the lives that were being lost. And Trump is the only one who has consistently brought that up and who humanizes the reality of war.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and speaking of Biden and him just being like out to lunch, there's more coming to light now about the whole Autopen scandal. And
Mhm.
I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse as more information comes out. So Trump ordered a DOJ investigation accusing Biden and his aides of using Autopen to sign the executive orders, pardons, and then, other documents without Biden's full awareness. So that investigation has started. And Trump was calling it one of the most dangerous scandals in US history. And I think it is. People all over social media are saying how this is so much bigger than Watergate ever was. So, House Oversight Chair James Comer is leading a parallel probe, and he's demanding sworn interviews from Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, and then several senior aides, Annie Tomasini, Anthony Bernal, who was one of the people that everyone's saying was like kind of running the presidency
Right.
behind the scenes, even though we've never heard of him, Ashley Williams, Neera Tanden, and then a few others. So they're going to put subpoenas if people refuse to come. But so far, Neera Tanden has given a testimony. So there was a closed door hearing before the House Oversight Committee on June 24th. And that's where Neera Tanden came in. She was the former staff secretary in Biden's White House. And she testified that she authorized the use of the auto pen on signature-worthy documents without ever directly speaking to President Biden about it and not being sure who gave the final approval. She said she, quote, directed Autopen signatures, end quote, but never discussed Biden's approval directly and acknowledged she was unclear about who it was in the inner circle giving the orders to sign it. This is just crazy. Like, she was signing on presidential decisions without knowing if the president ever even knew about the decisions, let alone approved it.
And admitting to it.
And then,
Like,
yes,
this is criminal, like
in
literally.
testimony. Like, what? What the hell? I mean, this is huge. And this is why they're saying this scandal is way bigger than Watergate. Like, this is freaking huge. And so afterwards, she goes and talks to the press and she basically gives like a one-liner saying that she answered every question. And so then she was asked, like a reporter yells out, were you disguising President Biden's condition? And she said, absolutely not, and like storms off. And it's like, it looks so bad. And here's my question for Republicans. Why the hell was this a closed door hearing? Why? Like, this administration is supposed to be completely transparent. Why would they have a closed door hearing? Everyone should know what happened during the last administration because it affected us all. These were decisions that completely changed our lives. And why are we not like privy to this information? I mean, they are releasing the transcripts, but I just don't understand why they should make this public for the entire world to see.
Well, this is apparently a decision that was made by James Comer because he apparently thinks that public sessions pressure witnesses to sugarcoat their testimony. And his argument is that closed door sessions allow the committee to build factual records without leaks prematurely shaping the narrative. And he said that this type of hearing allows testimony to then be compared across witnesses for consistency before they're made public so that, the others can't hear the testimony as well.
Okay,
And
that's actually a really good answer. I was
and
like
I
so mad about that, but that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and I guess he's very consistent with this because back in December of 2023, he told CNN that his this is his general policy preference for closed door depositions is that you do the deposition and release the transcript later. And at the time he said, quote, every deposition in the history of America has been done in closed doors. But we release the transcript. We will release the transcript. You will know when he coughed in the transcribed interview. And this was obviously referring to a different case, but he was basically saying that every big criminal case in America has a closed door deposition. And then he reinforced this a couple days ago on the 24th because he did an interview with the Washington Examiner. And he said, I always prefer the transcribed interview deposition as opposed to a committee hearing because it's so much more substantive. So that's his rationale. And from what I understand, it's completely up to the committee whether or not they want to hold public hearings or private depositions. So there's no hard and fast rule, and it's just based on strategy. And that's his strategy.
Well, now I feel stupid because that really does make complete sense. Like they're more likely to talk if it's a closed session,
But you're
which
not the
obviously
only
this
one.
woman did. Like she
Yeah.
laid it all out there.
But you're not the only one who was asking that because I saw a lot of articles about Republicans crying about like why isn't this being made public? So I do think his rationale makes sense, but I also think it makes sense to question it.
Well, and it makes me think too, like, because normally Congress is like we call it one big theatrical performance.
Mhm.
And so this makes it sound like, okay, maybe this is more serious and it's not about theatrics and they're actually trying to do something. Will anyone be held accountable? Probably not, but I don't know. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and wait and see.
Yeah, I do actually think it's a very good idea with this because this is fucking huge. This is like
Hmm.
treason level
Yep.
activity that was being conducted with knowledge of multiple people in the Biden administration, and every one of them should fucking go down for it.
Well, it's interesting because, I named those few aides, right? And some of them, it sounds like they're going to have to be subpoenaed, like they're not willing to come forward. So it sounds to me like this woman was willing to come forward and maybe she was granted some form of immunity. Because why would she say that? Why would she say, yeah, I signed his name, even though I had no idea if he even knew what was going on? That would implicate herself. So maybe there was some kind, like whoever comes forward, we're going to work with you. And maybe she's throwing everyone else under the bus. I don't know. But I was shocked that that's what came out. And I can't wait to see where this goes because she's just
Yeah.
the first one so far. I want to see what the rest of them, especially that Anthony Bernal guy. Um, so I have some big news coming out of Tampa, Florida. Um, Okay, so 60 missing children ages 9 to 17 were just rescued, which is like huge. We talk about the missing migrant children all the time. I don't know that these kids were migrant. I don't really have specifics on them because they're minors, but I know that 60 missing children were rescued. It was a 2-week law enforcement raid called Operation Dragon Eye, and it was led by the U.S. Marshals Service, and they coordinated with 20 agencies, including Florida's AG, FDLE, DCF, Juvenile Justice, and then all the local sheriff's departments for the counties around here. And the operation ran from June 2nd to the 13th, focusing on critically missing children. So, those that are at imminent risk of violence, trafficking, substance abuse, or domestic exploitation. And among the 60 kids were pregnant underage girls, including one that was carrying a trafficker's child. And with that, they arrested 8 suspects on charges like human trafficking, child endangerment, drug possession, and custodial interference. And officials are saying that this is the largest and most successful child recovery operation in US history. And what's crazy is like right before this hit the news and we knew about it, my daughter, who's in high school, was just talking about this. She's like, what is going on with all the missing kids at the high school? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, there's like a ton of kids missing, like girls that are like 15, 16 years old. And I was like, what? And I go on the sheriff's page, and sure enough, like it's constantly like there's a whole bunch of people. So I don't know if any of them were part of this rescue mission, but it's definitely Tampa is like a hotbed for trafficking.
Does your daughter know any of them that are missing?
No, it's at I think most of them are at the her like rival high school.
Okay.
So she doesn't know them personally, but I guess it's just constantly being posted on social media like so and so's missing. Have you seen her? And she's just like, this is like too much to be nothing. Like, what is going on
Right.
here? And I think a lot of people just assumed, oh, they're runaways or something like that. They'll turn up. But now I think it's maybe there's more of a trafficking thing going on. I don't know.
Yeah, because this was not the only task force in Florida this month. There was actually a 3-day multi-county operation this week, or the end of last week to this week, June 18th through 21st. And it was led by the National Child Protection Task Force, and it located an additional 25 missing children across 6 different Florida counties. And do you notice that whenever we talk about locating missing children, it's like Texas and Florida?
Hmm.
Like, are we hearing about this in California, in Oregon, Washington? Like, no, we're not
No, they're
hearing.
not even looking. They're not even
No,
trying.
exactly. Like, this shit needs to be happening in every fucking state.
Hmm.
So, props to Florida. But speaking of like blue states, we have to talk about the New York mayoral race for a minute because this is wild. Have you been following any of this, Stephanie?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
because a lot of people are literally planning on leaving New York and coming to Florida now because of this guy who looks like he might get in.
Okay, for anyone who has not been listening to what's going on, the leading Democrat candidate is a guy named Zohran Kwame Mamdani. And he is a 33-year-old state assemblyman from Queens. He's originally from Uganda, and he is a self-described Democrat socialist and member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And a few days ago, on June 24th, they did the Democratic primary, and he won with about 43.5% of the vote, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo. And his victory is being called like a political earthquake because it is like so far left of what the leftist like city of New York has ever voted for before, of New York City. So his views are totally in alignment with like Bernie Sanders and AOC. And it's just the super progressive, grassroots, far left ideology, but he's got the donor backing for it. And he makes Mayor Adams look like a far right conservative. So his totally socialist platform, here's what it entails: free public transit, rent freezes, public childcare, social housing, city owned grocery stores, higher taxes on wealthy people and corporations. He wants to reduce the NYPD budget and instead invest in social services, mental health, and youth programs. He wants to expand universal childcare, fully fund public schools, and get rid of charter schools. He wants to expand New York City's sanctuary policies and protections, which, like, aren't they already completely extreme? And he wants municipal voting rights for non-citizens. When it comes to the environment, his all about the aggressive Green New Deal policies and renewable energy. And he seems to be anti-personal medical choice and is very much aligned with strict mandates for vaccines and pandemic masking. And Adams is running against him for re-election as an independent, which we've talked about before, but so far it's not looking good for him. And the latest polls are putting Adams at like 13%. And so now, since Cuomo lost the Democratic candidacy, he's also apparently going to stay in the race as an independent under the Fight and Deliver Party. And he's currently polling ahead of Mamdani slightly. But this is like just a testament to the insanity of people in New York. They literally want a socialist government. And honestly, I hope this guy wins and that he taxes the fuck out of the liberal elite and the liberal corporations, and then maybe they'll get their fucking heads straight. But they should not be allowed to come to red states.
No, it'll be like California where it'll go to shit, which I mean, it kind of already has. And then they're never gonna admit what happened. They're gonna keep pushing more and more liberal ideologies. And that's what everyone in Florida is saying. They're like, don't move here and then vote in the same bullshit. Because this is what happens. In theory, socialism sounds great to people that don't know anything about history and the fact that it's failed every time it's been implemented. Free childcare, free groceries, free rent, like all this shit that he's talking about, free this, free that. What happens is all of the wealthy people and the corporations leave because they don't want to be taxed. And this guy, he literally won the primary. This isn't even the actual election yet.
Yeah.
And go on social media, you will see all of these realtors are like, our phones are ringing nonstop. Everyone is fleeing New York. Anyone that has money, owns property, owns a business, are getting the hell out of there before this guy gets in. And that's what happens. You get all the money that leaves, and then you're stuck with a city that starts to fall apart. And it's already like literally happening, and this guy's not even in yet. Um, I did hear though, like if Cuomo and Adams could get over their big egos and join forces and like run together, they could probably win, but they're never going to do that.
How could you run together for mayor, though?
I think like one of them would have to
Yeah,
step
step
out
out.
of the race,
Yeah.
but like support the other. You know what I
It would
mean?
have to be Adams. It would have to be Adams stepping down because, like I said, from everything the polls are showing, he's like 43 something percent, whatever it was. And Adams is so far down that he would need to like step down and just give it to Cuomo.
How crazy is it though? You have a socialist and then you have Cuomo who
I
like
know.
had to resign as governor for sexual harassment. Like,
I
what
know.
the hell kind of options for New York City? Are you kidding me? It's just crazy.
It's a clown show. It is fucking insane.
But
And
so many people fled New York during COVID and came to Florida, and it completely fucked up the housing market and made the costs go through the roof. And now
Mhm.
it's happening again. And it's just like, maybe
Same thing with
stop voting
Texas.
for this shit. And then you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to flee your city.
Same thing with all the people leaving California to move to Texas,
Yeah.
ruining this state too.
But it's like they don't learn. They don't like put two and two together that, like, oh, maybe it was these policies that caused this. It's like they just keep voting for it. I don't understand.
Because they're all delusional. They don't live in the real world.
Yeah, that is that is a good point. Well, we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll get some new neighbors soon. We'll see. We'll keep everyone posted on that as well. Um, all right. Well, I hope that everyone has a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Monday.